Good. Appreciate all you guys coming out this morning. Excited about game week. First game week, a lot of energy in the building. Had a great mock scrimmage on Saturday. Got a chance to go out and vault Hemingway with the lights on, and just all the players are really excited. I think they're ready to hit somebody else other than themselves. A lot of respect for Joey Jones in South Alabama. I've been very impressed with them. Big wins last year over Mississippi State, San Diego State. Worked with Kane Womack and Tyler Siskey. Both those guys have worked here, and both are very, very good football coaches. So just excited to get this thing cranked off, and I'll let you all ask any questions that you have.
Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll bring the microphone to you.
Going into the first game, do you think you're pretty set on your two deep, or are there still some positions open for?
Yeah, no, I do think that we're pretty set. There's a pretty good battle going on at safety. We moved Jalen Jones over there, with C.J. Moore and Zedrick Woods, but Jalen is making a big push here late. So maybe this week, we'll see there. But I think we got Jalen gives us some really good depth there for sure, and is pushing for playing time.
Like you said, they have a win over an SEC team from last season. How important is a fast start against a team like this that can be dangerous?
I think it's, fast starts are always very important. I think the guys will have watched that game on tape and understand it. It was also the first game of the season, and I think those are always tough because you never know really where you are or what to expect because you make some changes in the off season. So I think it's very important that you are very sound in what we do and can make the proper adjustments.
Matt, last September, you guys opened with Florida State, then you had Alabama and Georgia in that opening month. This season, it seems to be a bit more manageable. As a coach, what do you prefer, like a hard September like you guys had last year, or one you kind of ease into, so to speak?
Well, every team's different, and I think really in first games you are really focusing on yourself and getting better and making sure that you're very, very sound, because I think first games are very, very unpredictable, and you usually make your most mistakes in that first game. So I think it's very important to really focus on yourself and to make sure that you're prepared.
Man, a lot of guys hobbling around last week. I know Dawson Knox is probably not going to play. Other than that, everybody else will?
Yeah, I think out is Dawson Knox and G-Mac are going to be out. I think the rest will have an opportunity to play in the game. But, Dawson Knox and G-Mac are out. Kadir Shepard is going to practice tomorrow, and we'll see where he's at. But I think he's probable for the game.
Matt, what's Saturday going to be like for you? I mean, you've gone through a fall camp and everything, but taking the field as the head coach for Ole Miss on Saturday, what's that going to be like emotionally for you?
It's going to be emotional. I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I'm just excited. I'm excited about the opportunity, excited about walking through the Grove. I'm excited about locking the vault, excited about representing my university. And trying to put a team on the field that everybody's proud of. But I'm very, very excited, and that's going to be one of my biggest challenges in this game is to control my emotions and to be a very, very efficient and organized head coach and not let my emotions get to me. I think that's going to be one of my biggest challenges, but I'm excited and prepared for it.
Matt, you mentioned Dawson's out. Do you know a little bit more about his injury, when he might be back? Do you know how long he'll be out?
Yeah, I think he'll have a chance for next week, but I'm hoping Cal for sure. So I'll know more about that probably in practice next week. We'll try to give him the rest of this week to heal and try to get him back for next week. But that we'll know more next week about that.
What is conditioning like for Van Jefferson right now? And do you sense, you talked a lot about A.J. Brown on that inside. Do you see both of them on the field together?
Absolutely. So in some of our 10 personnel stuff, you'll see Van and A.J. in there together at the same time. And the good thing is you have Van, A.J., and Markel Pack that can play inside. So I think that will help Van's conditioning and get him playing in the game shape. And I think some of our depth at receiver will help Van for sure.
Matt, what's the makeup of coaches that are going to be on the sideline and who's going to be up top during the game? I mean, that's a softball question, but fans seem to want to know that.
On defense, the full-time guys are going to be on the field. That was important to Coach McGriff, that he's down there with those guys, and that the full-time coaches are down there making the in-game adjustments. And I think, and I agree with them. I'm excited about the way they've handled their defense, and they got a really, really good feel. And Coach McGriff feels strongly about making the calls from the field and in the action. So I feel really good about where we are there. Coach Harris will be up for the offense. Refs up and down. Yeah.
Who will be the defensive eyes upstairs?
Zach Brown, our defensive GA, very, very, very sharp, and does a good job. And we went through that Saturday at the mock game, and the communication was good. And I was on the defensive side listening, and was very impressed with how they handled everything.
Matt, you talked about you wanted to be an efficient, organized head coach. What's that mean for you? Does Phil handle the offense, Wes handle the defense, and you're just an administrator? Or are you involved in calls? How does that work?
Well, I think you have to manage the clock. You have to manage timeouts. Field goals, when to go for. If I am going to go for it, I need to be able to let Phil know that on second down if he's got 2 downs. Just being able to manage the clock and being an efficient head coach and making good game day decisions. I think you have to be in the game to do that. I don't think you can be all emotional and running around and doing those things. I think I can be into the game and be a motivator, but I want to make sure I'm into the game and making good decisions, helping out the defense with when do we want to block, if we want to go for a block, do we want to be punt safe. Just the little things that you have to do to, in my opinion, be a very, very efficient and good head coach.
But as far as like the play-to-play, like play calling, are you going to let Phil?
No, for sure. That's their job. Coach Longo's going to call the plays on offense, and Coach McGriff's going to call the plays on defense. And I will certainly interject if I feel like I can help in any way, but I'm going to let those guys do their jobs.
Following up on David's question, from a schematic and an emotional standpoint, the last time we did talk to you, talked about some mentors that you've had. Are there some coaches that you've reached out to now coming up into game day with everything that's going on? Is there anybody that's kind of give you some words of encouragement, and what have they said to you?
Yeah, I talked to Coach Cutcliffe pretty regularly. Talked to Mike McIntyre as well. But I think what you do is you pull from the best of all the guys you've been around, and you have all those experiences of all the coaches you've been around. And what you do is you pull all the good stuff that you saw from them, and that's kind of how you're built as a coach. And I think that's very, very important. And you also learn some things that you didn't quite like, and then you take your own spin and you put on it, and that's your coaching philosophy. So I think drawing on all those experiences that I've had from all those successful head coaches will all help me.
How many of the true freshmen do you plan on playing Saturday, if there is a number?
I think for sure Braylon Sanders could get on the field some and receiver. There's a chance Ben Brown could provide some depth at freshman. Those are the 2 offensive guys that stick out. I think you'll see D.D. Bowie in there at corner. C.J. Miller will have a chance to play some at safety. Ryder Anderson and potentially Breon Dixon. Those are the guys, the 6 off that kind of jump out to me off the top of my head.
Coach, how many running backs do you think we'll see on Saturday?
I think Jordan Wilkins will be the starter, and I think Devon Penniman has had a really, really good fall camp. I've been at both scrimmages that he's been in, and Jordan was out some. I think he really, really stepped up his game and did a good job. You could see for sure Sweeney and Brasley, D.K. Buford maybe, but I think maybe 4 guys you could potentially see, but probably Wilkins and Penniman kind of leading the way there.
Coach, from what we've been able to see in practice, you can kind of pick out the offensive leaders. Some of the offensive linemen, Shea, Jordan, Markel, but it's hard for us to tell who the leaders on defense are. Who's surfacing there?
I think Marquise Haynes, it comes to my mind. I think Breland Speaks as a leader. I think Dante Evans is the guy that kind of emerged to me. I mean, he's the guy that, at Mike linebacker, and he's calling out all the defense. I think that helps put him in a leadership role because of how much he's talking. So I've been very impressed with him and kind of the role he's taken, especially after the spring. I wasn't quite sure where he was at, but I really feel good about where he's where he is. I think Zedrick Woods in the secondary has become a leader. I like Miles Hartsfield where he is and how he communicates. So I think you're starting to see some guys emerge, and I think early in the season will tell a lot about those guys. And I think what we're all waiting for is the first time these guys go through some adversity, who's going to step up and be those leaders. And I think that early in the season we'll find that out.
Any more questions down low? Or we'll take questions up top.
All right, Coach Luke, what kind of progress have you seen from A.J. Brown and D.K. Metcalf from the spring and in the fall camp and then now as we get ready for game week?
You know, I think last year those guys were freshmen, and obviously with DK getting hurt early, I've been very impressed with Coach Peeler and the way he's developed those guys, because those guys are very talented and they have a huge upside. But I've been impressed with the way he's developed them, just their technique and the way they use their hands and the little different techniques in their routes. They've both been very much improved from the spring, and we're looking for big things out of both of them.
Any more questions up top? Or we'll take them down low now.
Matt, just on the film that you've watched from their game against Mississippi State last year, what sticks out about what they were able to do to give State problems, or maybe what's your biggest concern about them going in?
I mean, they didn't give up any points in the second half. That was very impressive, and obviously I got a lot of respect for Kane and the job he does on defense. They got number 1, Jeremy Reeves. He's their best player on defense. He's a very good player. I mean, he's very talented. He can show up at corner, at safety. He's very good. Their leading tackler is back, Daryl Sanji. So they do a lot of movement. They're not going to stay still. They're moving around, a lot of blitzing. So we definitely have a challenge there. And then on offense, they got a really good running back coming back. They got both their quarterbacks coming back. So, I think it's going to be a challenge on both sides of the ball.
Man, I heard Coach Longo talking about, 12-game season, how long it can be. You built a lot of depth on the offensive lines and defensive lines. Are you going to substitute just based on situations, or are you going to just try to run a bunch of people to keep them safe, ready to go for the second half?
Yeah, no, I think you'll see substitutions freely in the defensive line in the middle of the series. In the O-line, you're going to see a 3-way tackle rotation with Alex and Rod and Greg, try to keep those guys fresh. And then, with Jordan and Durante and Javon, you'll see those guys rotate in as well.
Speaking of subs on the D-line, how many do you plan on playing in the rotation?
No, I think Victor Evans, Markel Winters, Ryder, Ross Donnelly, Austrian Robinson, all those guys will be in there at some point just to keep guys fresh and rotate. And I feel really good about, Coatney and Breland and Benito in there inside, and you got with Kadir and Victor, and then Marquise, you feel where you got guys that have been in there and played some. So we're excited about that.
Any more questions for Coach Luke? All right. One more with Chuck.
I saw where you mentioned A.J. would do your punt returns. What about kickoff returns?
Yeah, so I've been very impressed with Dede Bowie. He's shown flashes back there, and then also Jalen Jones has shown some flashes in kickoff returns. So I think you're going to see Dede and Jalen back there on kickoffs, and you'll see A.J. on the punt returns. You can see Trey Nixon at both. Trey Nixon has worked both punt return and kickoff return just because of his speed, and he's pretty dynamic with the ball in his hand. So you could see him in there as well.
You've talked about A.J.'s athleticism and whatnot, but what do you think he brings at punt return? It looks like in the past there's been a lot of emphasis on really just making the catch and everything. Do you see that unit being a little more of a playmaking unit?
Well, I think A.J. has a lot of moxie to him, so I think him making good decisions on when to fair catch and when not to, I think he has that. But I just think his physical ability to break tackles, I think that does bring a little bit more to the table than just catching the ball and always fair catching it. I do think he has the ability to break a tackle and maybe change field position and get the hidden yardage that, even 10 yards after a punt is a huge deal, and I think he'll be able to do some of those things for us.